Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 14th June 2015 and we have a packed show tonight. We have two sets of guests on tonight and we're going to be talking about time banking, and also we're going to be talking to people regarding the Public Banking Forum of Ireland. And we have a couple of things that happened during the week that we're going to be talking about as well. So without further ado, before we crack on, we'll find out what the communication channels are.
Yes, communication channels this evening are...
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Yes, 046 927 1212 is the number for the studio this evening and every evening. What else we got for you? We have the 3 streams on the website. We're streaming in Ireland, in the UK, and also in the US of A. So we also have Facebook, anti-social media. You can check us out there, see what we're all about, see what the latest news is. We also have the YouTube channel. We have we mentioned Facebook. Sorry, we have the TuneIn Radio app for your listening pleasure. You can check that out on the website as well, or you can just go to tuneinradio.com. And in the search box there, you can type in OYM Radio or Open Your Mind. You will find us there. And I think that's all we have, yeah. No, yes, we've got, the chat room as well. Nearly forgetting the chat room. Say hi to everyone in both chat rooms, our own here on OYM, and also the chat room on People's Internet Radio. I'll be monitoring both of those chat rooms for questions for our guests this evening. Alan.
Excellent, Steve. Okay, a couple of things we'll talk about, things that happened during the week. You probably all heard that Cleary's department store in O'Connell Street has closed down now, has closed its doors for the final time with a loss of 460 jobs. Also, a bread company, Irish Pride, has also gone into receivership. And this is supposed to be an economic upturn, according to the government and Enda Kenny. Now, for those of you in kind of myself and Steve's age group, which is in
21 and a bit.
21 and a bit, Cleary's clock was such a monumental, monumental meeting point.
It was, yeah. Well, I'll meet you under Cleary's clock.
Yeah, it was either outside Easton's or it was under Cleary's clock.
Yeah.
And
I think we all met someone there, didn't we?
No, yeah, this was before mobile phones and the internet. And it was, especially when it was dating, I think it was more got to do with dating. A lot of the times got to do with dating.
Of course it was, yeah.
I'll meet you outside underneath Cleary's clock. And I think, certain people of a certain age group can actually relate to that. And I'm sure they might keep the clock there as a sentimental thing and not remove it. And it'd be great if they do keep it there. But again, it's just a pity that 460 members of staff have lost a job. Some people have worked there for 40 years. Unbelievable. I mean, Cleary's has been there for, I think they said 162 years it's been there. And it's just a pity that that's just a part of history in O'Connell Street and Dublin that is closing down.
Well, I heard someone say recently that Cleary's lived through 2 world wars and the 1916 Rising, but yet the Fine Gael and Labour government put the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah,
they killed Cleary's basically.
I think that's well said. Also, the Cleary staff are staging a sit-in. And they've been doing that, and they've been protesting, and they're obviously hoping that somebody might come along and buy it, take it over, or do something with it, fingers crossed. But this is what happens when you have a government that we have, how they can destroy the country. And you know what will probably happen? Somebody like Dennis O'Brien or somebody like that will come in and buy Cleary's for pennies on the pound and probably turn it into, luxurious, God, put me teeth
that
in.
Was a big word.
Nice flats.
Nice flats, yeah.
Nice flats. They'll probably turn them into penthouse suites and stuff like that, more than likely, and pennies on the pound. The other thing is, just going back to the Pain Genie now, you've seen the advertising. The Pain Genie seminar is on next week in the Ardboyne Hotel in Navan, starting at 1 p.m. So be there as early as you can for 1 o'clock. It's going to be we're going to be starting probably at 1. Fingers crossed. That's what we're planning because we have limited time in there. The room is booked only for a few hours, so we need to pack in as much as we can. Now, just keeping in mind that this is purely a seminar for people to see the Pain Genie in action. We're not selling it, we're not promoting it, we're not endorsing it. We just want people, myself and Steve had the Pain Genie tested on ourselves. We were happy with it, with the results and what it did. So we want other people to see it. Now, it's up to you. If you come along and you see it working and you think it's great, brilliant. If you see it working and you don't like it and you're not interested and you don't rate it, that's fine too. That's the whole idea of it being a free seminar, so you can come along and make up your own mind. Simple as that. Also, Richard is going to be doing personal training on the Pain Genie and the Energy Machine. It's a foundation course on the 11th and 12th of July at Bewley's Hotel in Leopardstown, Dublin. The places are limited. The cost is $350 or $290 if you have purchased a Pain Genie from Richard in the last 12 months. Now, you know, there is a recession on, and I know that's a lot of money. I know myself and Steve won't be going anyway because we can't afford that kind of money. But for people who can, and you have a Pain Genie, by all means, you can go along and do the training. You got your Pain Genie, Steve. How you getting on?
I did, yeah. Mine came in there on Thursday, and I have to say, the kind of the meetup that we had with Richard, and we had a quick go. Richard done my shoulder, as you know anyway, and that worked out for me. So based on the strength of that, I got a credit union loan, and I got one. Came in on Thursday. I watched the DVD that accompanies the device, which was 1 hour, I think it was 1 hour 20 minutes, and it gives you kind of an overview of the device and what it can do, and some kind of a quick start guide also. So I've been kind of playing around with that on Thursday evening, and then again Friday evening. Didn't really play around with too much over the weekend because I had other commitments that I had to do. So didn't really get to play with it at all. But it is fairly simple to use. The DVD kind of goes into a lot of detail, and there's a lot of testimonials on it as well. Again, testimonials, some people don't like testimonials. They reckon people are all just actors. Maybe they are, I don't know. But I have to say that it definitely did work on me, and as I did say in a previous show, I was pain free for almost a week, 5 days in fact, after my treatment. So I decided that I would just go down the road and just get one just to have it there, because there's a lot of people in my family who have the, like say, arthritis and other such complaints, and I just figured, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get it in and help those. But I say I haven't really had that much time to really kind of go in depth with it. But as soon as I do, I will actually do a full kind of report, if you like, and we'll cover that on a later show.
Yeah, we'll be getting the OYM Pain Genie in during the week as well. Just a little delay with that, but it will be coming in. And it's amazing when you tell people about the Pain Genie that, the amount of people go, well, I've got a bit of pain and I've got a bit of pain. So we will be giving it a full test on a number of people as when we get kind of competent and we get used to using it and know how to use it fully to get the best out of it. That's the plan of attack. So we'll keep you posted anyway. Steve, you want to tell us about Bernadette Bowen? Yeah, Bernadette Bowen, I'm sure everyone's familiar with Bernadette. If you're not, I'll just give you a quick one-on-one on Bernadette. She did kind of have cancer a couple of years back, and she changed her diet, and based on her food regime, she was able to cure her cancer. And she actually came on the show. She gave us a great interview. She explained the whole process to us. But on the 23rd and 24th of June, Bernadette's going to be hosting a seminar. She just dropped us a note and asked us would we give it a plug, and we said we would be delighted to. And she goes on to say she's delighted to announce 2 dates for next month. Well, obviously it's going to be this month now, for the return of Brian Clement of the Hippocrates Health Institute. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. Brian and Bernadette will be giving 2 talks in Galway and Dublin on the 23rd and 24th. Brian Clement has inspired millions of people to improve their health. His incredible 44 years of practical experience on helping people help themselves makes him a formidable teacher. If you're sick, tired or burned out, let us show you how to improve your health and give you the tools you need for lasting change. Bernadette said, I have lost count of the amount of times I have seen Brian talk, both here and on my trips to Hippocrates, and she always comes away learning something new. There's going to be limited spaces for that event, and tickets are sold on a first come, first served basis. You can call Bernadette on 01, that's Dublin, 845 2957.
That's 018452957. I will give that number out again at the end of the show if I remember to do so. You can also check out Bernadette's website. That's www.changesimply.com. Changesimply.com. And tickets for the event are a mere €35.
Excellent stuff. Now what we'll do, Steve, I think we'll do Alan and Steve's week at the end. So we'll crack on, we'll get our guest in and start finding out about time banking. Now, this lady, Kaaren, we have to get the name right because I think that's important, works for Time Banking UK, and we asked Kaaren to come on the show and tell us all about time banking, because time banking is very big in the UK and it's doing very well over there, but we don't seem to have an awful lot of over here. Well, I've seen very little, if any. There's one or two isolated Let's systems around the country, but there's no kind of coordinated time banking system being rolled out across Ireland. So one of the things that we talked about was maybe doing this, but it's going to take a lot of time and effort to do it. So what I wanted to do is get Kaaren to come on the show, talk to us about it, tell us all about time banking, what they're doing in the UK, how it works, and everything about it, and then we can kind of go into more detail. And if people are interested in doing something regarding time banking, then obviously they can contact us at OYM, and we can see what we can do depending on the amount of people that are interested. But before we do that, let's get Kaaren in. Good evening, Kaaren. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me to be on the show.
No problem. Thanks a lot for coming on. Now, obviously, as I said, time banking in the UK is growing massively at the moment, and you have a very big organisation over there rolling this out, and it's doing wonders for an awful lot of people because, as usual, because of mass unemployment, a lot of people have a lot of time, but they don't have a lot of money. So, and I was talking to somebody on Facebook. We'll just kind of put messages on Facebook tonight just before the show started, and I was talking to her about time banking, and that is fundamentally like a bartering system. And I said, imagine if you had 20 or 30 people in a group around you that you could actually swap. You know, you do one thing and they can, and then you want, you know, they might want to do some painting in the house and they'll swap that for getting your car fixed or whatever. So let's go into more detail. Let's find out about yourself, what you're doing with time banking and the setup, that point, time banking, what way the organisation is set up.
Okay, lovely. Well, I've been working with Time Banking UK for almost a year. It's the only national umbrella, time banking national umbrella linking and supporting time banks across the UK. And basically it provides guidance and resources and practical help to link people into their time banks, and also to help organisations who want to set them up. I was involved in running a time bank in my local community in 2006, and from doing that just where I live, I really saw the kind of the fruit, if you like, from involving local people, helping people to realise that they have skills, enabling them to swap skills and meet new people. And then I developed a time bank in the homeless organisation where I worked, and I spent 4 years rolling that time bank out across the whole of London within the homeless organisation. And then from that process of sharing the learning with other homeless organisations around the country, and also a couple of homeless organisations in Ireland, I then decided to go and work for Time Banking UK so that I could talk about time banking to more and more people.
Excellent.
Because it's such a wonderful thing.
Excellent. And tell us what your experience with time banking in the UK. How is it growing? And, you know, give us an example of, say, a local community that have contacted you and wanted to take it on. So what's the process?
Yeah, so basically there are lots of different types of community groups that might approach us. And so for instance, one could be, like recently, we actually had a church that contacted us and said that they were thinking of embracing time banking because they would really like to not just help the congregation, but to reach out to the community. And they recognised in the community that a lot of people were struggling. They run a food bank. They'd seen the need through people coming into the food bank, and they wanted to do more. And so they actually started to find out about time banking just initially by phone calls with us. Then we invited them to come on an introduction session that we were running, which is a 3-hour session, and it just kind of goes through the basics of time banking and what you need to think about when you're going to start one up. And if people are still interested at that point, then we invite them to come on a 2-day broker training, which is absolutely vital to learn all the aspects of running a time bank. And then this particular church has decided to embrace time banking. They're based in Leeds. And that's just one of a community group. It could actually be a doctor's surgery that decides to embrace time banking, or a school, or a community group, or a tenants association.
Okay, so tell us about what happens. Do you have is a software program, a website, and you said there's a broker involved. So how does it all work?
That's right. So yes, so basically we have a website where people can go on our website and look at the kind of resources and the policies and the kind of, and case studies and little film clips, interviews, so that they can kind of get a flavour of what time banking is. And then we can support people. And if they decide to become members of Time Banking UK, then they can access the members area, and the software is part of the membership. And there's 2 different types of software. And the software that I used to use when I ran my time bank was called Time Online. And that was a software that an administrator would input all of the hours and the exchanges. Recently, a couple of years ago, a time bank in Portland in America really kind of grappled with this idea of what do we really want, what do we need to record the hours, what do we want our members to kind of see, if they could actually record their hours themselves and go on and post offers and requests. And they've developed software called Time and Talents, and they've partnered with Time Banking UK and allowed us to adapt the software for the UK use. And that's basically being rolled out to time banks, and it's a really exciting piece of software that enables me, if I was a time bank member, to go on, have a look at someone else's bio, their biography, see who they are, see where they are, what kind of skills are they offering. And for instance, I could be really interested in going cycling at weekends, and I could go on there and I could see if there's any cycling groups, or I might post something on there myself and say, how does everybody fancy meeting up at King's Cross Station 9 o'clock Saturday morning, and we'll all go for a ride. And so it kind of takes the emphasis off of the broker having to organise everything themselves. And you asked me a question about the broker. Time banks operate in different ways, and in Northern Ireland, where there are actually quite a few time banks that run in a volunteer capacity, they tend to use like a steering group, members, they're volunteer members who all have a different role to play in the time bank. And so it doesn't just come down to one key broker to organise all of the exchanges.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it'd be too much for one person. So it could be committee, say 5 people who would be in charge of the initial the setup. So they'd come to you and they'd say, right, we just 5 people here that we're interested in doing this, and we need to get access to your software. You need to set up a branch. Yeah. And these people will be the administrators of that part of the software, yeah?
That's absolutely right. And so because everybody has different skills, So you could have somebody who really loves doing admin. I mean, I occasionally meet people like that. I wish I had somebody working with me who loved admin. But like equally, you've got people that really love to speak to people and they're very welcoming and they like to make phone calls, and other people are very practical and they want to just kind of maybe deal with the catering side of things if you're actually having a group come in to meet each other for the first time. So I actually really love this model of involving people from the very beginning. And the time banks that work best are actually the time banks that consult the people within their group or within their community and ask them, what do we think about this idea? Let's get involved and co-produce a time bank ourselves, so that it's not a top-down approach. It's very much facilitated from a grassroots level. And everybody's hour, they contribute, whatever they're giving, whether they're actually doing admin, baking cakes, picking somebody up who wants to come to the group. Everybody's hour is worth 1 credit. Everybody's equal. And that's another aspect of time banking that differs from the previous let schemes that used to exist.
Yeah, you just dropping out a little bit there, Kaaren, just to let you know.
Sorry.
That's okay. Hopefully we'll be okay. Yeah, that's a question. I mean, our listeners on the chat room are on the ball, and it's a question that I've been asked time and time again about time banking. And they say, but hang on a minute, if you have somebody going to cut somebody's grass, and then you have somebody who's, say, a solicitor or who's a qualified labourer, and they're saying, how come their skill is going to be valued the same? Well, what I would normally say, and I'll let you answer this, but I've normally said to people, look, you only use the skills you're prepared to use a credit for. If you're a brain surgeon and you're going to say, well, I'm a brain surgeon, my time's valuable more than the person who's cutting grass, well, don't put down brain surgery as one of the skills that you're going to offer the time bank.
Yes.
Only put down the things that you feel is worth the credit and equal to other work that's been done. Is that fair enough?
That's absolutely right, because most of the time when we have people that join the time bank who have very professional jobs, that's not the thing that they want to offer on the time bank. They really want to do some other things, that perhaps skills that have been dormant for a long time. And equally, occasionally people do offer counselling or legal advice on the time bank, but they don't really consider themselves to be more valuable, their time to be more valuable than somebody else, for instance, who might be offering some plumbing work or electrical work, because they really, they find it very valuable to have somebody who's, if you like, been vetted through a reference system to come into their house and do some fix-it type jobs. So it's kind of coming from a different mindset from the beginning, really.
Yeah, definitely.
And,
I think that's important. I think that's the one question that comes up most of the time when I speak to people about time banking. They say, "Well, hang on, I've professional skills, and how come my time is same value?" Well, that's really got to do with the let system more so than time banking. The let system has more of a credit rating regarding your skill set, but I feel that that's, again, it's bringing in a certain hierarchical system, which I don't really agree with. So the time banking system is more, it's all level playing field. And if you don't want to offer them skills, well then offer to take somebody's, go and buy somebody shopping or cut grass or paint a window or something that you feel is a right credit for that time. And I think that we have to put that over to people to let them know that, this is all about 1 credit, 1 hour, regardless of what you put down. So if you sign up to a time bank, only put down the skills that you're prepared to do for that 1 credit.
That's right. And and it's never meant to replace paid work. So you often, what you find is people perhaps that have been out of work for some time for whatever reason, whether it's through illness or another reason, and maybe have lost a bit of confidence, and they're just thinking, I wonder whether I can still do painting and decorating, or I wonder if I can still do gardening or hairdressing. The time bank will actually enable them to kind of sharpen their skills again and to see whether that is something something that they want to do or whether they can do it again. And then when they've built up their confidence and some references, they can then take that further and go back into paid work. So it can be a stepping stone for people as well, or it can also be an opportunity for someone to promote their skills as a plumber or an electrician. But that's a separate thing that you arrange with that person to do paid work. It's not a time bank activity once their money exchanges hands.
Exactly. Now, the other question that comes up on a regular basis is that what if I get somebody to come in and give me an hour of their time for a credit, and they come into my house and they might want to paint or do something and they damage something? What happens then?
Okay, so I have to say, after, I think it's certainly Time Banking UK has been around for 15 years, but time banking has been around for longer. I think there's only ever been one claim in all the time that people have been covered by insurance, and that was for paint spilt on a carpet, which was then obviously rectified through the insurance. If you're basically running a time bank and somebody offers a skill like painting and decorating, you really need to find out from the references whether that is something that person can do. And so we always take 2 references for people. If they're offering something like beauty therapy, painting, something where, you want to make sure they really can cut hair, for instance, then you're looking for references from people who've been happy with the work. And you also might have an opportunity, depending on the environment that you're running a time bank in, to see whether people really do have painting skills. And so one of the things that we did in the homeless organisation was we had an opportunity to paint a kitchen. And so we did it as a group activity. And then I could see myself who actually really did have the skills that I would then be happy to send somebody out to somebody's house. And occasionally, we also manage people's expectations by saying this person is not a professional painter and decorator, or this person is not a professional hairdresser. They are giving their time. And so also we would encourage somebody to, where they were physically able, to help with the painting and decorating themselves as well. And I think if you can kind of manage the expectations from the beginning and cut out some of the risk aspects by actually doing a little bit of reference checking, then you're really less likely to come up against those kinds of problems.
Exactly. Now, is that obviously the issue about insurance obviously ties into people that are pretending to be somebody they're not, maybe so they could rob a house or something. How do you cover that side as well?
Gosh, that's amazing. Well, there haven't been any incidences of people robbing a house. But, I mean, there is safeguarding that takes place. And so there is usually time banks will have a handbook. In the handbook, there is a code of conduct which a member will sign up to. So if the code of conduct is ever breached, you can always go back to that person and say, well, you remember when you signed up, you agreed to. And that could be usually like simple things like not smoking in somebody's house, unless you've asked them to, and not helping yourself to somebody's kind of tea, coffee, biscuits and stuff. Again, you know what I mean? Most of the time people are going to actually offer you a cup of tea. But it's just general
manners. Yeah, politeness and manners.
With the kind of burglary aspect of it, that is definitely one I've not been asked before. And I think partly because it's just not happened. But should something like that happen, if you are insured, then you're covered against all forms of liability. And as long as the exchange that has been arranged with the broker's knowledge or through the software, it is an exchange that has actually been logged, then you are covered by an insurance. But if you actually go ahead and start planning exchanges without the knowledge of that exchange being with someone else or the software, then actually you're not covered by that insurance. And so it's kind of just one of those grey areas once you start establishing a relationship with somebody in your neighbourhood, for instance. Hopefully you're going to be able to kind of deal with any issues that come up. And the insurance premiums are very expensive, and that can actually be a real hindrance to a time bank starting up, especially a small community one. And so some of the time banks have adopted a disclaimer process where they actually say from the beginning, we're not insured, we can't afford to do insurance, but we are all basically going to take responsibility for what we do and how we operate. And should anything happen, they need to obviously let the broker know. And some of the time banks will have kind of like a small amount of petty cash to replace a broken curtain, pelmet, or whatever it is, if that is the case.
Yeah, I was going to say that about the insurance, and the disclaimer is probably the best way to go because money's going to be scarce anyway. And so just to say, well, look, all this is like an introduction agency, like a bit like a dating agency. We're introducing one person to another, and that's it. What happens in between that is then not really, from an insurance point of view, it doesn't concern us, because you couldn't go down that road, because that's just opening up a can of worms, I think, from an insurance point of view. And I think it's just to do the introductory thing, plus the fact that if the database has a facility where you can actually put each member's photo up there, yes, and a feedback system where people say, this person came out, we booked the time, he or she was on time, they did the work efficiently, I would recommend them. A bit like eBay or adverts, where there's a kind of feedback system, so people go, oh, he's got a high rating, he must be good, or she must be good,
Absolutely. There's this wonderful software called Time and Talents, which allows you to endorse people and like them. And, and also on there, you have the opportunity to say that you weren't happy with something. And so that's something that gets flagged up to whoever's administrating the site, and that they can actually go in and find out what happened if somebody wasn't happy with an exchange. And I think really what I was thinking while you were talking is that the whole point of really establishing time banks is to bring back trust between people.
Yeah.
Where trust is being eroded on a daily basis through really by the stuff that we read. The newspapers are full of the reasons why we shouldn't trust the person living next door to us. And actually, the time bank, really, the process of the time banking is helping you to realize that you can trust the person again next to you and borrow that cup of sugar or the lawnmower, or going back to how things were when we used to kind of help each other out in the community. And so trust is a really big part of that. And it's a byproduct of time banking, and it is a wonderful thing.
I think people have to step up to the mark and be responsible adults. And if something does happen, or they use something and it breaks, ideally it's supposed to be labour. Now, if say a mechanic comes along and says, right, I'm going to trade an hour of my time and get a mechanic in, I think the other question that comes across is that it's all about your energy and labour and not parts. Like, you would buy the parts for your car, the mechanic would fit them for you because the credit is for the labour. And the same with, obviously, if you're going to cut somebody's grass, if you're using somebody else's machine and it breaks, then you have to kind of put your hand up and say, well, I was using it, I'll get it fixed for you. I mean, that's just being a responsible adult.
It is. It's exactly what you would do with a neighbour anyway, hopefully. And of course, there are some time banking exchanges that over time, time banks have decided not to do just because of the risk aspects. So like with motor mechanics, I can remember a time years back when that was a skill that was on offer in a time bank. And then bit by bit, I think just because of the liability aspect, what if my car's fixed by that person and then I have an accident, who's liable? And so I think sometimes, and babysitting is also another skill that used to be often on time banks that's then, because of all the child protection issues, that's kind of slipped off. But I think that if it depends very much on the time bank that you're running, if you know everybody in your community, which definitely some of the time banks are like that. They're small, they're very localized, people know each other. They even started off as a babysitting circle and then they've become a time bank that's expanded. So I think it really is up to you as a group to decide how you're going to set yourselves up and manage the risk aspects, and whether you decide to embrace motor mechanics, for instance, if you were a time bank in Detroit that was, Not sure what's happening in Detroit, but it's kind of the car center, or was the car center.
Yeah.
In America. So you would expect there would probably be lots of exchanges in that area that were connected with cars. But I mean, at the moment, what we do, we generally just, I have to be honest, advise people to kind of not, maybe leave the kind of car mechanics aside when they're starting up.
Okay, so you have to be careful. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to go over to Steve. Steve will have a few questions for you there.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions in here, Kaaren.
Yeah.
And when Alan was talking earlier about eBay, the way you can rate people and all that sort of stuff, that's fine. But in eBay, you're buying a goods. You're not really buying services, so you're not really inviting anyone into your home. But and Alan, this is for you as well. In the event of, let's say, people starting up time banking, and let's say people have a profile picture, and you look at the profile picture and you go, "Oh, I really want that service, but he looks like a bit of a shady character." Would it be an advantage? I don't know if it would, but I know a lot of people when they're starting up things like they will get, say, Garda clearance or Garda vetting. Now, Garda will be like the police, so you kind of be police. You'll have a police clearance certificate just to say that you are who you are and everything's okay. Would that be something that could be incorporated into time banking?
So basically, if anybody wants to do kind of time banking that involves vulnerable people or minors, then they have to have a DBS, what we call a DBS check. I don't know whether it's the same in Ireland, a disclosure barring system, and then we would actually request that person to have that to have a DBS check. On the whole, time banking, because of the nature of time banking, that it's quite ad hoc, it doesn't actually kind of warrant for all of the members to be DBS checked. And in fact, they wouldn't be happy to do it like that. It would only be if you were running a regular activity on, with the same group of people, kind of like, say, for 10 weeks. If you had a look at the profile of someone and you didn't like the look of them, then you just move on to the next person that's offering that skill. You must, you really have to trust your instinct. So we do the brokers will do a vetting process. They'll visit the person or invite the person to come and meet with them and go through they'll fill in a questionnaire, an application form, and take 2 references. And that's pretty much it. So I think it's really important for people to use their instinct. If they're not comfortable with somebody, then they can kind of just move on from either not even arranging that exchange or change their mind. And we also, in the 2 time banks I ran previously, I would create opportunities for people to kind of meet each other prior to an exchange, just to have induction days or coffee mornings, or coffee evenings or whatever fits in, so that people can actually meet people prior to inviting them into their homes.
And what about, let's say, someone who was on a registered sex offenders list, mm-hmm. and if they wanted to join time banking, they had a skill. Would if they were on a list somewhere, would that something that would be brought up?
If they were on a list, and because on our application forms, I mean, and again, that would depend on the time bank, whether they had the question, do you have any previous convictions, whether they disclosed that conviction or not. They may decide not to. So we don't do police checks on everybody. But if that person did say that they wanted to, for instance, they said they wanted to offer piano teaching, piano lessons, or do maths homework with school children, we would then have to get that person DBS checked. We also have always make sure that children are supervised. So we say to the parents that your child must be supervised whilst they are having a time bank exchange. And I think that generally what would come up, certainly if somebody does have an offence for being a paedophile and they're on a list, then that's when that would get flagged up.
Yeah, no, because I know a lot of people would probably be concerned about stuff like that, especially inviting strangers into your home. Again, it could be giving grinds to school kids, or it could be even babysitting services. But John,
absolutely.
John is wondering, by rating a time bank depositor, John says, you run the risk of devaluing their personal brand. Therefore, their time or their value becomes less. Would you agree or disagree?
I'm not quite sure I understand that question.
Well, I think,
can you just give me an example of what that person means?
Yeah, I think what I think John means is that if you were if you had a professional service or a company, and
Yes.
you were using that as part of the service in the time bank, you devalue your brand by doing it in the time bank. But my reasoning on that is, don't use it in the time bank. Do something else.
I actually think the opposite of that is true. I think a lot of companies, if you like, would like to have their logo attached to community projects because it makes people in the community realise that they're, you know, a good egg, for instance. Oh, that's interesting. View Cinema are sponsoring that. They're not so bad after all, or whatever. So, I mean, I do think that when there have been organisations or companies, businesses who have actually sponsored or, you know, funded a time bank activity, it actually does the opposite to what that person is saying. But if they're actually choosing to, for instance, let's just say it was a draft excluding company that was a business, but they also offered to do draft excluding on the time bank, that wouldn't, I can't see how that would undervalue. I don't understand how it would undervalue, quite the opposite, but they could actually be doing both. They could be draft excluding quite large premises, but then offer to do draft excluding to people that are elderly, for instance, who've got drafty homes for time bank credits. But also, once again, it comes down to choice. So that person that's running a business may just decide, well, you know, they don't want to offer that exchange, or they may want something back for their business. So perhaps they want web design or some kind of organisational exchange.
Okay.
To improve their business.
Yeah. Well, just benefits.
I don't know whether that answers that question or not, but it's not one I've been asked before, so I hope I've answered it adequately.
Yeah, that's fine. That makes sense. Now, tell us the story. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. Tell us the story you told me about, you know, when people say, well, I've no skill, I can't really offer anything, you know, and they're racking their head and they don't realise that they can offer quite a lot. And tell us the story you told me during the week.
Absolutely. And I'd say that most people, when I ask them about skills, will look at me blankly and say they don't have any skills. It's extraordinary. But when I first started the Community Time Bank, the first person I signed up to the Time Bank was a lady who was paralysed totally from the neck down. She had 24-hour carers. She was living in a flat, so she wasn't in a care home. And she had a large garden. And up until I met her, occasionally a group of volunteers would come very sporadically and do a garden. But what she really wanted was kind of some people to get involved and come more regularly. And I was quite happy to help her get members to do that because I knew that we had lots of people on the books who wanted to do gardening. But I asked her what she would like to offer in exchange because Time Bank is not volunteering. It's a reciprocal exchange where people are earning credits and spending credits. And so I wanted her to also feel valued and to have a chance to use her skills. Now, she was a Spanish speaker, and she said she got quite excited when I actually asked her what she'd like to contribute, and she said that she could teach Spanish. And actually, it happened that I had somebody who'd been waiting to meet someone she could have Spanish conversation with. And they met once a week, and they met for 6 years. It was quite extraordinary. I mean, that was definitely a regular, what kind of started off very much as a time banking exchange where we added the hours, etc. But it went beyond that. They became friends, and the person who who had the garden, her garden was, not only was it maintained, but she also gave permission for raised beds to be put in the garden so that there could be kind of mini allotments for people in the community to grow vegetables, and that also made it possible for this person to have nice fresh veggies herself and herbs and stuff. And she would request the types of herbs and flowers and vegetables that she would like to see in the garden. Lots of great things happened as a result of that exchange.
That's brilliant. So people do, I mean, some people do say, they say, well, I don't really know what skill to have, but they have more skills than what they realise and things that they can do. I'm just conscious of time, and Steve has a couple of good questions coming in there. So, Steve.
Okay.
Yes, this one came in from the captain of the ship. That's the captain on People's Internet Radio chat room. He says, what about people who are on the dole? He said DWP, dole/social security in the UK. Say you were dobbed in, seen working, that sort of thing. They would stop your money, sanction you, as they like to call it, before you had time to finish that cup of tea. Has your guest got any information on this?
Yeah. Well, actually, for years and years and years, time banking has not been, benefits haven't been affected by time banking at all. It's slightly different with job seekers allowance, but I'll just come on to that in a sec. So the DWP are quite happy with time banking. It's not volunteering, and there's no goods exchanged. It's actually, they see it, the majority of the, if you start, DWP is very, they're sort of localized departments, and if you have a good relationship with your local DWP, you can actually go in and explain a lot about your time bank, which really helps. But actually, there is a lot of evidence to prove that time banking can help people get back to work. So on the whole, they're pretty happy for people to do time banking. But if they also are on job seekers allowance and they have to spend 30 hours a week actively seeking work, then they have to do the time banking in addition to that. But some of the DWP officers see that those two kind of are mutual, and that they will allow the person to, for instance, they're using their skills because they're using the computers at that time bank to look for work, for instance, or to improve on their literacy. So sometimes that's not an issue. On the whole, there's also kind of, I think, how different kind of legislation gets brought in all the time. So, for instance, you're supposedly got to do volunteering. It's a bit of an oxymoron because you can't actually make somebody do volunteering, but there's this sort of obligatory volunteering aspect that's come in if you're claiming job seekers allowance. And time banking is not volunteering, and so it's not actually able to kind of be part of that. Those hours of volunteering. So I don't know if that makes sense. There's changes all the time. We're constantly in contact with the DWP to make sure that time banking continues to be favoured.
I think, can I just jump in there? Remember, when people sign up to the time bank, you can put the hours that you're available at that time. So if it's only Saturday and Sunday, you only put down Saturday and Sunday, and that should keep the people like the social services happy because you're doing it outside of their times. Steve?
That's right. Yes, that's right. I mean, you've obviously the important thing is that you mustn't lose your benefits if you're claiming benefits. That it's vital that you don't jeopardise your benefits in any way. So if you do have any queries about that, it's really important to speak to your advisor at the DWP and make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to cause your benefits to be sanctioned.
Okay. Steve, you got another question there?
No, well, there's still more information coming in on the screen I haven't caught up with yet, but yeah, UK Prepper says, at the end of the day, the time bankers will be local people, and anything that gets local people talking, I'm guessing, and interacting is a good thing for us. Probably not for them. He says, if you know who I mean. Obviously that's the government because they're trying to tax everything. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely a good thing for local communities. And when you think about it, you could probably have a time banking in a street, a village, a small locality, and again, it is kind of, as you said earlier on, Kaaren, it's getting the community back together again, and not being afraid to knock on your neighbour's door and ask for a cup of sugar or ask them for the end of the lawnmower. I think that's that is gone to a large extent, and it's kind of sad, because when I grew up as kids, that's what it was all about. Now that was kind of back in the late 70s. Our neighbours knocked in for this and that, and we knocked into the neighbour. And even Christmas time, this is one thing I've always remembered back from when I was a kid. Even Christmas time, New Year's Eve, 12 o'clock, the whole road would come out and everybody would join hands and have a bit of a sing-song. But nowadays, the bells strike at 12 o'clock and you look out the window, there's no one out. No community spirit anymore.
We've lost it. We've lost the community spirit.
You can get it back. There's 30,000 people and 3,500 organisations involved in sharing their skills. And, with 2.3 million hours traded in mutual support. So it's very much, it's interesting how it's something that a lot of people haven't heard about, but it is growing. And it's in the political climate that we're in, it basically, what's a negative becomes a positive when it comes to time banking, because people really have the opportunity to make change in their communities and have the kind of communities that they really want. Definitely. Because the skills are in the community.
Well, we have a lot of time. We don't have the money, but we have a lot of time. Now, there was a question in there from John, and he's concerned about the negative rating for individuals rather than firms. But, I mean, you have to have a feedback system, because otherwise you have to know who you're bringing into your house and how good the work's going to be, even though it is based on a credit system. So I do think that, and I think the administrator, I mean, if there's a dispute, then it has to go to an arbiter. So the actual broker or the administrator would have to get involved and obviously arbitrate listen to both sides, and then make an agreement on that and change the system if it needs changing. So I think that, I don't know, does the system allow for that arbitration?
It does, and it also, I'm sorry I got a bit of feedback there, I hope you're not getting that. It does allow for it. It allows for communication and dialogue, and obviously it's an opportunity to mediate between people when there has been a disagreement, which are great skills to have in a community, because what the thing is that when you look at all the reasons why not to start a time bank, and I had that in the homeless organisation that I worked for many, many years. We looked at all the reasons not to, and then we decided to go from a positive risk. Instead of looking at all the negatives, why not? There were too many good reasons to start it. And I would say that from being involved since 2006, that there are too many good reasons, and there are so few examples of where things don't work out, that they're far outweighed by all the fantastic outcomes from actually running time banks.
Yeah, and I think we have to say as well, it's not just about, swapping labour and credits on time bank. It gives people self-esteem. It makes people feel wanted in the community and wanted by people to use the skill. And it gives them maybe confidence going out and meeting people. And all that ties into hopefully finding work and getting a paid job. Now, this is voluntary. It's not mandatory. There's no law. You don't have to join a time bank if you don't want to. No. And it's not all about, like over here in Ireland, we have a scheme called Job Bridge, which is from the government. Basically, you work for nothing. For internship, and there's no guarantee there's a job at the end of it. Time bank is all about volunteering and using your skills. If you have the time and you want to have other work done in your house by other people with other skills, and you want to save money, well, time banking is the way to go.
Absolutely. I mean, in America, they're so far ahead of us with time banking that they actually, because they don't have a welfare state, they depend on time banking to actually meet their needs within their communities and their homes. And they literally build houses and have the most incredible social enterprises that are going on to fund the time banks to continue. So, I mean, and you can actually really you can join Facebook groups that are, international to find out more about that. But I think just to remind people that, people are assets, And time banking is just one tool to actually show people that they're assets and that they have things to contribute. And I think it's a wonderful tool. And I know that there are others that will be out there that will help people to realise that they have something to contribute. And I think the other thing is it just actually gives an emphasis on redefining what work is. So whether it's raising healthy children or preserving families, looking after your elderly parents or looking after any kind of family members, it has value. It has tremendous value. And I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed about being involved with time banking is it kind of it puts the emphasis on what really is valuable in our society.
Excellent. And just very quickly, last question is, I take it the data is fully protected. You have that, all sorted in the system. Yeah. Is this a question that came in regarding the confidentiality of the data?
Yes, absolutely. So there is all the data that is stored, for instance, on the software. Find it fully technically, but it's coded in such a way that it can't be accessed, spammed or whatever the word is, but also kind of each person that is, so we can't see the information that each time bank puts onto the software. It's only the main administrator, our IT manager for Time Banking UK, that helps people to set up the software and their own membership on the software. He would have access, but everybody's signed, the data protection documents, and also the administrators that your time banks choose to administer the hours or whatever, or put or to kind of look at the data. They also they really should be signing their data protection code of conduct as well. There's different levels of administration that you can decide on in your group who has which level of administration. So you can actually have various levels of support and access to people's information. Yeah. So it's confidential. It's important that people know that their stuff is safe.
There are more questions coming in, but unfortunately we have to call it because we've other guests to get in. Kaaren, thanks a lot for coming on. Much appreciated. I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to do a part 2 for time banking to go into more details, because there's a couple of more questions there. But it was basically just to give people an overview of time banking, and we can find out more information. Thanks for coming on. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your details off you there, so people can find out where to get you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been good information, and as Alan said, we'd have to get you on again, because there's probably a lot more ground that we could cover, and there are a lot more questions coming in as well. But can you just give us, if people want to find out more about what you're speaking of this evening, have you got the website you can give us out there?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to find out more. So there is the website, which is www.timebanking.org. Yeah. And then I would be very happy for people to email me too, and that is Kaaren, Kaaren, @timebanking.org.
Yeah, keep going. I'm typing as quick as I can.
And then we've got we've got a great partnership with Volunteer Now, who are based in Northern Ireland, and the contact person is called Sinead Quinn.
Yeah, go ahead.
And her phone number is 02890
Yep.
232
Yep.
020.
Okay.
And there's an email address too, and that's Sinead.Quinn. If I'm presuming you know how to spell Quinn, but let me know.
We're Irish, I hope so.
Q-U-I-D, it's probably a very common name.
It is.
At Volunteer Now, all one word, .co.uk.
Okay, the only bit that I've missed out on that so far is the Volunteer Now. Sinead is based in, what did you say, Scotland?
So Sinead is based in Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland, sorry.
Yeah. And there's some very active time banking going on in that area. and she's be very happy to have anybody contact her.
Right. So
and did you get her contact details? Sinead.Quinn.
Yeah, we have Sinead.Quinn@volunteernow.co.uk. And we have the phone number
and then there's myself. And also, I should give you a phone number for Time Banking UK. So I don't know what the code would be for England, but it's 01453.
Yeah.
750.
Yeah.
Yeah.
952. And that's our helpline. Basically, anybody can phone that phone number. They can get advice, more, and ask questions. So I've given you, and we've also got a Twitter hour, a Time Bank Twitter hour on a Wednesday evening from 8 till 9.
Yeah, go ahead.
And to be part of that conversation is #TB Hour.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, we're going to have to wind up there, I'm afraid, Kaaren. We have to get the other guests on. But thanks again for coming on. Much appreciated. Now, what we want to do is, if people are interested in time banking, bringing it over here into Ireland and rolling it out, send us an email if you're interested, and we can take it from there and see where we can set up a trial system and see what we can do if we have enough people interested. Kaaren, just stay with us there for a minute, and we're going to pop over to a piece of music, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back, and we're talking about money. Yeah, it's a little bit of simply read there. Money's too tiny to mention. It certainly is.
It's all about money, and we're going to be talking about money now. We have our next guests on as two chaps. One's James Miller, and the other chap is Gerry Duddy from it's called the Public Banking Forum of Ireland. And we heard about the Public Banking Forum of Ireland a couple of weeks ago. We got an email in and we were told about it. And obviously we were very interested in finding out if people are setting up alternative banking systems or alternative monetary systems, because we know the current fiat currency system that we have at the moment, it's debt-based and it's just not working. It's a massive Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme, it's going to collapse. It has to collapse. Fundamentally it has to collapse. And we have to, when people say, we need money for our services, for our hospitals and all that kind of stuff, they try and they try and solve the problem with the current financial system, which doesn't work because we're using fiat currency anyway, and it's all debt-based. Now, I don't know much about the Public Banking Forum, and Steve hasn't heard much about it either. So this is why we thought we'd get James and Gerry on to tell us all about it and what their plan of attack is. Is it going to be an alternative currency? Is it going to be the same currency? We don't know, but let's find out. Good evening, chaps. How are you doing?
Good. We're all here and alive and well.
Good stuff. Right, who, James and Gerry, who wants to tell us first about the Public Banking Forum? Do you want to start off, James or Gerry?
I'll give it a rattle.
Okay.
I first came across the concept of public banking in an interview between Ellen Brown and Max Kaiser about 4, maybe 5 years ago. And it was like somebody turned on the lights. Now, it wasn't that she explained it all, because I've been on a serious learning curve ever since. But she did hit a few buttons. And I mean, since that, we have really learned a lot as to how we could change the system in Ireland. And effectively what we have is total monopoly here by a couple of commercial entities. And whereas probably the strongest economy in Europe is the German economy, but they have a system where almost 70% of the banking system is owned by the public. And now, that's a big subject. That needs to be discussed in some detail. But whereas we have a total monopoly by the commercial units, the Germans have almost 70% owned by the public. Now, what difference does that make? It makes enormous difference, because inherent in the banking system is the whole matter of creating credit. This is relevant to the credit unions as well, which are called credit unions, but they don't actually issue credit. But through the control of the issue of credit by the commercial banks, they effectively control our economy. They have complete control over it. Throw in on top of that the Lisbon Treaty, Article 130, the role of the central bank, the role of the ECB, who is the ECB, who is the central bank, and you see how the boom-bust cycle is totally at the mercy of the banks that create the credit. And because they create the credit, they determine where the credit is invested. And as far as we can establish, certainly the figures for England were to suggest that almost 80% of the credit created in the British economy went into property. I suspect that it was actually worse here, but we can't get the figures for them. But the Germans, by comparison, they have a system whereby that credit issue is broken into a couple of thousand independent banks. Now, that's enormously important because there's no one bank then that can dictate where the credit finishes up. Whereas in Ireland, with half a dozen different banks, they could compete with one another and fight for the market share, which was all in the property market, and it went a boom and then it went bust, which is all it could do in due course. And the sad thing about it is that after all of the codology that has gone on for the last 6 or 7 years, the property market didn't properly deflate, and we now have another bubble in the making, as I see it anyhow. We have a situation where a very basic thing within the economy is that the salaries don't match the house prices, and you can add that any way you like, but if you're trying to buy a house in Dublin now at the moment at 30 years of age, 25 years of age, you'd want a well-heeled granny somewhere.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do know from what Ben Gilroy told us that Germany are doing brilliantly at the moment, and Angela Merkel wants to increase the interest rates. Now, if she does that and gets her way, it's going to destroy the people who are just barely hanging on paying their mortgages here in Ireland. And so I'm just curious, is your banking proposal or your system based on the current financial system using the currency, or is it a new currency? What way are you planning it?
Well, we put forward a proposal. Now, it is quite possible to do this in several different ways, but we have put forward a proposal based on 12 months of negotiations with the German Sparkassen Foundation in Bonn and their representatives, Nicholas Bergmann and Dr. Jürgen Engel, and indeed Dr. Thomas Keidel. We also met with Christopher Simpson from England. And a lot of work has been done to sort of outline a base system for Ireland, and the Germans have actually produced a 42-page base document for us, a sort of a concept paper. And you ask, is it within the system? Yes, as of now, it is. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be done differently. And in some respects, if we went back to traditional banking, the whole thing would nearly fix itself. The problem at the moment is that 98% of the entire banking industry is just a self-serving 12-headed rhinoceros, funding and feeding itself. Yeah. That's all it is. Less than 2% of the entire banking industry would provide all of the trades in the world, and that includes tourism. So what we have is an enormous racket in banking. Now, that really came to pass as a result of the big banking cartels in America demanding the loosening of the regulations starting in around 1990. Now, you can go back to Reagan if you like, but starting in around 1990, they changed the legislation in America from where derivatives were illegal.
So you're talking about the Glass-Steagall Act?
Well, basically, they dumped it, but I mean, they changed the legislation from a situation where derivatives were illegal to a situation where they were both legal and unregulatable. And that's the real kernel of the issue. Lots of people talk about fractional reserve lending. Fractional reserve lending in itself is not the problem. The problem was the securitization practice that developed along with the derivatives. And that's, instead of sticking to a reasonable level of fractional reserve lending at, say, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 1, there's every reason to understand now that the ratio of lending is out at 1,000 to 1 in some cases. Deutsche Bank, for example, have, I think, 96 trillion in derivatives on their books.
Well, I tell you,
off balance sheet, and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs between them have another 150 trillion. Now those are mind-blowing figures.
They are. I think we need to clarify the whole derivative thing. At the moment, I'll just give my explanation of my understanding of a derivative for people who aren't familiar with it, if you don't mind, James. Now, in 2008, when we had the bank bailout, the derivatives market was worth 60 trillion. Now, at the moment, it's worth 700 trillion, and we are in for a complete collapse. People need to know, well, what's a derivative and why is it so important? Well, let's put it this way. Say a farmer has crop fields, and what they do is they come along and they will buy up next year's crop. Now, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. They might make money on it because he could have a good yield, or he might have a bad yield. But then it's forecasting, it's the futures market. So they will buy next year's crop, and then they will sell it on for a profit, and they will pass that on. And this is what's been going on with the derivatives market. It's future purchases of businesses of
correct,
yields.
But you're absolutely correct. But what don't understand, or what needs to be understood, is the extent to which that has developed into an industry.
Yeah.
And that's like 98% of the entire banking industry is pure speculation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not betting on horses. It's betting on the wind. It's betting on the sunshine. It's betting on anything that you can conjure up. And it is all codology.
Yeah, it's a futures market. They're betting on things that haven't happened.
Well, apart from them not happening, like, you could take a guess that there will be 4.5 million people in Ireland. You could bet on that some way. Yeah. But I mean, what they're betting on is just codology.
It's madness. And on top of that as well, James, I believe they actually sell insurance on them derivatives as well.
Yeah, but that's not, like, that's only just part of the overall racket. That's all. It's just part of the racket. I mean, the racket should be nailed, and it has to be nailed somewhere. And for the most part, no, not absolutely, but for the most part, we need to study the different economies as to how they've been dealing with their banking industry. And the Germans, as far as we understand, are the crowd who have their best handle on the system. And I don't presume for a second now that it's absolutely perfect, but it's bloody good. And, for example, with the German Sparkassens, they have lost no bank in, I think, it was 40 or 50 years. Now, that's a significant statement in the whole context. But let's go back a little bit now to a couple of other fundamentals. Within something that people mightn't understand or mightn't actually be aware of. We pay tax every day of the week and whatever. Like, if you go in to buy something in the hardware shop, you pay 23% VAT on some and 13% on labour and whatever else. And, you know, it's a good deal of tax and you wouldn't be that pleased about it. But at least for your tax, you get some form of public service. Now, you mightn't say it's a great public service, but you get teachers, you get schools, you get this and that and the other. You get something for it. However, almost 40% of everything you buy is interest. That's because of the debt-based system. Yeah. And that amount of interest is just phenomenal. Phenomenal is the only word. And two things are important about that. In a publicly owned system, that interest that is gained in the system is recycled. It belongs to the public and it gets recycled into the system rather than being bled off the system. And it's bled off through the commercial banks through a wealth transfer from the 99% to the 1%. That's how that operates. Now, it's not to say, like, the 40% is the accumulated interest. It's not, I'm not saying that you're paying 40% to the bank straight on that particular item. That's not the understanding. It's the fact that if you, let's say you take a loaf of bread. Now, there's a lot of things in the process of buying a loaf of bread. You have everything from the farmer who grows the grain to the miller, to the lorries, to the whole range of stuff from the time that grain is planted, the whole cycle of the grain, right down to the stage that the loaf is baked, wrapped, transported, and out to it. Everybody is paying interest on their commitment to that loaf of bread. Mm. And it ends up at being almost 40%. In the case of, that's an average figure now. In the case of rental property, the payments by the tenant in rental property is almost 80% interest. Mm. Now, and by creating publicly owned banks, you create the system whereby the interest, instead of it being bled off, it's actually recycled into the system, and you create a far more stable economy.
Are you using the current money, though?
It doesn't really matter what money you use.
Right,
That's not the issue.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get Gerry in there. And Gerry, tell us a bit more about setting up the branches and what you want to do.
Well, just the key thing about the local public banks, it is credit creation locally. That is the important issue.
So give us an example. So you have an office, or you have a branch, and you're setting it up. Where does the money come from? How does the maths work out regarding giving people a loan?
Okay, well, it will be taking in deposits. Okay, the leverage ratio is like 6 to 1.
Okay.
Which is very, very conservative. And
you're still going to be charging interest, or usury?
You're charging interest. Right. Any surplus that remains after providing the service of giving the loan is returned to the bank to increase the equity in the bank, or if there's any surplus after that, it is returned to the community in the form of grants for social projects.
But isn't usury or interest the problem? Isn't that one of the problems? You know, because obviously we've heard about the mathematically perfected economy, where it's actually the current system without the actual interest in usury.
But nobody is making a profit here. The only takings by the bank is the operating profit of operating whatever what they need to operate. Nobody is making private profit. Any surplus is used to increase equity in the bank, to improve the quality of the bank and the standing of the bank, and anything that remains in is returned to the community. So there's no private profit, there's no private shareholders, there's no securitization, no speculation.
So you're fractionalizing, but you're
missing the point. The people misunderstand the whole issue of, or the whole matter of usury. Usury, this is what I refer to as the bleed of the system. And you go back to the 40%. Now, how do I put it? See, there are many different ways of solving the problem. And one of the reasons we have continued to negotiate with the German Sparkassen Foundation is simply this. We are in the euro. And fair enough, you could talk about not being in the euro, and that would be fine in its own right, but we're in the euro. And the fact is that across Middle Ireland, there is very considerable support for staying in Europe and in the EU and even in the euro if it was to survive. Now, I'm not averse to exiting it, and I can understand, and I can put plenty of arguments for actually exiting it. However, when we started out, we couldn't get any discussion around this subject whatever. And if we talked about getting rid of the euro and all of that at that stage, we wouldn't even be able to talk about it. You'd be told, I have already been told that I'm wired wrongly for
right, okay.
trying to explain this to people. The fact of the matter is that we are in the euro, and if what is wonderful about the German system is it is the backbone of the German economy. It is working within the euro. It is working under all of the regulations, and there's nobody in this country who can say that it doesn't work. And when you can, like, it isn't that this is the total solution to all the problems. It is a significant part of the solution. I'm not suggesting, and I don't think Gerry is either, that this is the only part of the solution. There's plenty more that we could broaden the discussion into, but it is a significant part of the solution. It would it would take back into the community's hands the control over the issue of credit. And by doing that, it effectively ends the usury concept. And the interest that's charged in the system is then simply a management instrument. It's no more or no less. And I understand the argument that people make about positive money and the PME and all that. I don't get the perfect mathematical economy. Maybe it works. I don't understand it. I have a base degree in mathematics, but I still don't get it. I don't understand how it works. I have had somebody try to explain it to me, and I just lost me, and I still don't understand it.
So can I just ask, are you going to fractionalise the deposits? Is that the, I mean, you say you 1 to 6, there's a ratio 1 to 6. So you'll fractionalise the deposits and you'll charge an admin fee just to cover your costs, which is understandable.
I'll charge an interest on it. The loans will have to be competitive because, I mean, if you, for example, are a customer in the bank and you would deposit 100,000 in the bank, in a public or a community bank, you won't put it into it unless you're going to get a cut on your interest or on your deposits that at least matches what you can get down the road in the commercial bank.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing I was going to ask you. Are you going to be tied to the interest rates based from the IMF?
Well, I mean, you have to be competitive. It's a big world out there. There's no point in being naive and sort of thinking that you can run the economy out of a shoebox and live in the shoebox and have no relevance to the rest of the world. The fact is that at the moment, the credit unions have, I think, 7 billion lodged in the commercial banks by law. They can't go anywhere else with it when they can't lend it. That's depositors' money.
Yeah. And
they can't get a cut on it. Like, it's 0.9. I think they get up to 2% in some of it, but I think across the board it's only 0.9 of 1%. That's all they're able to get for it.
Yeah, which is not good at all.
No, and I mean, likewise, on Post we're selling savings schemes there, and if you go back to June of 2013, the commercial entities were able to exercise so much clout that on Post were required to cut their bonuses on the post office savings. They had to cut them by half, if I'm not mistaken. And to go back to the banking concept that we're talking about, individual any customer that's out there will have the option of going to a public bank or to a commercial bank. And if the public bank wants their money, it will have to be competitive in terms of interest rate. Now, here's a critical issue. The credit unions at the moment are fantastic institutions, and I certainly don't want anyone to think that I'm here to knock the credit unions or in any fashion. I would think they're fantastic institutions.
I would say they used to be, James. They used to be the poor man's bank until the banks, the central bank got involved and beat up the credit unions and said you have to increase your interest rate because the high street banks were losing money hand over fist because the people were going to the credit unions for the loans. Now they have a higher rate of interest than the banks, which I think is the complete point of the credit union was that's why they called it the poor man's bank.
Well, I mean, effectively what you have, and this is where Middle Ireland has no idea of the pup that they were sold in the Lisbon Treaty. The Lisbon Treaty was a scam of enormous proportions. And I voted for it, and I apologise for that. I voted for it for a particular reason. I hadn't studied it in any detail, but I did vote for it for a particular reason. But I apologise for that, and I say with all of whatever is in me that it was the biggest scam foisted on the Irish people in a long time.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And it has left the ECB and the central bank with complete and absolute control over all matters finance. And what happened in the Newbridge Credit Union is a reflection of that. What happened in the Dáil 3 months ago is the summation of it, in that when Minister Noonan introduced some legislation to the Dáil, I don't know whether he was being challenged or I don't know how it came about, but he made a simple statement. He said, and I'll quote loosely, I'm not exact, but I'm very close to the wording. We had neither hand, act or part in the drafting of this legislation. It was done in the central bank. We only went down and collected it. Now, that's the extent to which the Lisbon Treaty has given complete control over matters money in our little system. Now, here's the point. What we are talking about, despite the control that the ECB has, our banking system would take back control over the issue of credit into the hands of the communities. Now, if we want to talk about exiting the euro and going back to a different currency, that's all fine. That's perfectly fine. We can talk about that. But within the system that's there, the public banking project and the public banking proposal can take control over the issue of credit. And herein then lies another fundamental question and that has to be discussed over time. If we were to, the proposal that we've put forward so far is basically to put 10 community banks across Ireland. Now, if they were to take, let's say, 15% of the market, it would take a few years now for them to develop that 15% of the market, but let's presume for a second that they were to take that 15% of the market. The credit unions at the moment have maybe 10%. That's in total only 25% of the market that has been taken away from the commercial entities. We would need to double that again in order to have a 50-50 split between commercially owned banking elements and publicly owned elements. Do you understand that point?
Yeah, but I think I think the idea is great, but I think the banks will end up beating you up because if you are offering loans to people on a lower percentage than they are, then they'll come in. They'll do exactly what they did to the credit union. They'll come in
That's
and
up to us.
yeah,
That's up to us. The banks have to be competitive. If we set up community banks, I mean, it's not a question of issuing a loan at a cheaper rate. It's a question of being competitive, and it's a question of focusing the issue of credit into the productive economy instead of creating bubbles in the economy. And therein lies the problem. And by creating community banks, those banks have control over that element of the creation of credit.
Well, I hope, at the end of the day, I hope that's the way it goes, that they stay in control. Now, we have 2 questions come in. Steve's going to throw them questions at you. Gerry, just to let Gerry jump in there. Gerry, if you want to take these questions there and then pass them over to James, that would be great. Steve?
Okay, yeah, well, we've got a couple of questions here, and I'm going to start from the top. I think that's probably the best thing to do. The first one is from Joan McGuire. She said, Jim and Gerry, you both know me. Why do you think since the formation of the state has no government past or present have even discussed this issue, but most certainly will have it in their manifesto for the 2016 election and then place it in the basket?
Well, maybe it's because the Public Banking Forum has been promoting it for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
James,
John? Do you want to comment?
Well, I mean, Hello, Joan. That's the first thing. Herein is a fundamental issue. The fact of the matter is that the entire banking system of the Western world is controlled by a very tiny number of people, and this is why I go back to Germany all the time. The Germans have this cracked. They have a system that, despite the fact that we're aware of the banking cartels, the German people own 70% of the banking system in Germany, whereas if they had the same system as England or Ireland, they would be as bust and as broke as we are. At the moment, Deutsche Bank have only about 10% of the German market. But if they have 96 trillion of derivatives. They're as corrupt and as crooked and as big a part of the scam as anybody else. But if the German people allowed them to have 50% of the market, where would Germany be today? Now, we haven't wakened up to this reality here, and unfortunately also I'd say part of the answer to Joan's question is the interlink between our royal masters and history as it developed from, say, 1919, 1922. There's a whole raft of issues there now that open up a big, big debate. And the bottom line is that in too many cases, we never really defined our independence in any respect. And unfortunately, some of the best people in the country got shot in 1916 and 1921, 22 and whatever. And, between the War of Independence, that they were a big loss to us. Yeah. And in truth, the level of sovereignty and independence that was envisaged in 1916 and in 1919 in the first all, that was never really achieved. And so to answer Joan's question, the banking cartels didn't take over yesterday. They've been in control for a long, long time. We never really got the independence. But you can go back, anyone that wants to go back and check it out now, I think it's 1942, the Central Bank of Ireland Act. There was a discussion then about the issue of credit. And James Dillon opposed the proposal that was in before the House. But that proposal and that act was put through the Dáil with only 5 members in the House. One of them being James Dillon, who objected to the principle of giving the banks control over credit. But it has never been discussed. And we've met a lot of people over the last couple of years to try to engage with them about this, and they hadn't an iota. Not from Adam. We met significant people who didn't understand fractional reserve lending, and they wouldn't even discuss it with us.
Yeah, well, that's the trouble. That's the trouble with bank staff. I've spoken to bank staff, and I've asked them, did they know about it, and they say they didn't. And I think, well, you're using it on a daily basis. But listen, James and Gerry, just keep an eye on time, and we have a couple of more questions. So let's get the questions out of the way, and then we'll be able to talk about what you're going to do in the future and what's coming down the line. So, Steve, you have another one there?
Yeah, I have a question here from John on PIR chat room. And John says, could this banking system take advantage of the vulnerable in society who are most likely to use it and allow the organisers at the top to make real-world fiat currency profit?
No.
No.
Simple no. There are critical issues here in terms of the governance of that, of the banking system here. And absolutely no is the answer to the question. If it was to be set up at all, you could set up a system that different to what we're talking about, but in terms of what we're talking about, there are very specific governance issues where the units of bank will be owned by the public, will be managed professionally, but will have community representation on the board. Now, there's a lot of work to be done to define that.
Yeah.
And So I'm not going to, that's a big discussion in its own right, but the answer to the question is no.
I think we'll have to do a part 2 on that one. Steve.
Okay. Duncan, there's a couple of questions here and comments from Duncan Brown, and I'm going to just go through them in the order that they come in. But Duncan says, as long as you operate in a usury situation, at some point it will revert back to what we have now. The people that set the system up now may well be honourable, but at some time in the future corruption will creep back in. He goes on to say the only fair banking system is the one set up by Bradbury as a credit-based banking, not based on debt, but the credit of the nation.
The one in Germany is operating successfully for 200 years.
Okay, well, we can't
knock that,
can we? Okay, well, Gerry, tell us where are you at now at the moment, and how will this be funded?
Well, the banks will require approximately between 5 and 10 million per bank to set it up. That is basically to get the license from the central bank. They will have a central service provider which will provide all IT, information technology, management support, product design, everything, which will probably cost around another 5 million too.
Sorry, you're saying the banks are going to fund this?
No, we hope the government will fund this.
Right, okay.
We have put 64 billion into the private banks already. What have we got? A monopoly who will not lend to businesses.
Of course.
Just don't care. They tried to tell the Bank of Ireland to reduce their rates, and what did the Bank of Ireland tell them?
Yeah.
Government, so.
Well, we are in a fascist state. I mean, the banks are controlling everything.
The private companies, so.
Yeah.
They're not going to be told what to do by the government.
Exactly, and the fact that they're controlling the credit, which was a major mistake. But then again, when you have people that are puppet masters and in control, or they can be blackmailed or corrupted, that's what you get.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's all right. I mean, there's no point in even talking about corruption in this context. I'd say I'd use a different word. I'd call it stupidity and innocence. I'd safely say that there's too many people who are running our country and they haven't the faintest idea.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that one. I mean, we vote these people in because people go, oh, well, he's a nice guy. And they don't look and say, well, what's his experience? What is his knowledge? Has he got a good corporate business sense or business? Is he a businessman? Does he know about business? Because I heard during the week about this Dynama sales that went on. I mean, it's ridiculous. We sold them off for peanuts, and these businessmen came in, turned them around, and in 3 years they're making over 100 million.
Yeah, and I mean, you raise a very fundamental issue here. In the context of the credit union deposits, they're obliged, if they can't lend out that money, they have to put it back into the commercial banks. And the last time I checked, there was 6 billion in the pension fund. Now, for example, what could be done with that money? If that was put into a public bank, a banking system, let's say even 50% of it, that would leave you around 6 or 7 billion. And leveraged to the tune of 6, that would leave you with 35 or 40 billion. That could be used to solve the entire private debt problem across the country. Simply by empowering people to buy out the loans that they have with the commercial banks. Yes, it would have a big impact on the commercial banks, but do you think anyone would feel sorry for them? I certainly wouldn't.
No, definitely not. Well, just to kind of sum up, whereabouts are you now? Since you've got together and you got organised, what stage are you at now, and what's your next stepping stone?
Well, that's an interesting question. We've had a letter from the Department of Finance during the week to confirm that they are considering the concept paper which was produced by the German Sparkassen Foundation under Dr. Jürgen Engel. And they are considering the document, and now we don't know what decision the Department of Finance are going to make. Obviously, we're not privy to that. But even in the current climate of the banking inquiry, I think that the public service have very good reason here to sort of nail their independence from the political element, and to put out a very strong case. And I see something in today's paper there about the department perhaps beginning to like owning a bank. It could very simply do this through AIB or through the post offices with a little bit of discussion and a little bit of imagination. And you asked the question, what are we going to do? We're going to wait another little while to see if the department are prepared to move it on. Otherwise, we intend to make this an issue in the general election.
Okay. Gerry, you want to add in something there?
Just to say that the German Sparkassen banks, the public savings bank in Germany, they focus on SME lending. Now, SMEs provide over 70% of our jobs here, and it's something similar in Germany. So this is the main purpose of the public banks, is to focus on SME lending, because 2015 figures from ISME, who represent 9,000 small and medium-sized enterprises, tell us that over 50% of their SMEs can't get loans, and another 10% don't even bother to ask. So that's 60% of the SMEs not getting loans to provide jobs. So supporting them is key, and that is the key function of the local public banks.
Well, I hope it works out for you, because it sounds interesting. I'd like to see the figures and how it would all pan out regarding your fractionalising depositors' money, and obviously
the simple answer to that is in Germany in 2012 the 417 Sparkassens paid 2.5 billion in tax, and they are profitable, but they paid 2.5 billion in tax as well.
Yeah.
They are profitable, and what proves that these banks can work is the credit unions, because what you have at the moment is the credit unions are doing all the donkey work. For the front of house management, for the private banks, they're doing it all under banking regulation, but they have none of the benefits of banking.
Yes.
And they're being screwed into the ground. They're being forced to cannibalise themselves, and ultimately, if they're not very careful, they will be just sold off like the Newbridge Credit Union.
Well, they will be, because at the end of the day, I mean, I remember the credit union years ago when I was young, and it was great. You got a loan, you paid very little interest, and it was just brilliant. And we used to call it the poor man's bank. And as soon as I heard about the central bank getting involved, and now if you go down, you have to do everything in triplicate, and you have to have X, Y, and Z, and you have to actually have your mortgage fully paid. They want proof that all your mortgage payments are up to date before they give you a loan. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Well, sure, the sad thing about all of this is that there hasn't even been a discussion, and I challenge some of our elected representatives on this. They haven't even discussed any of this, because I don't know whether it's just, I choose to think it's stupidity, but in the entire amongst the entire 166 of them in the Dáil, they haven't even discussed this problem. No. Never mind discuss a solution. They haven't even discussed the problem. There's an enormous black hole across Middle Ireland in the SME sector.
But you see, the problem is, James, sorry for jumping in there, but they haven't discussed it, is because you have to remember, some of these politicians, they'll kick the can down the street, they'll do the 4 or 5 years in government, get a massive pension, go, I'll leave it for the next guy, and that's it. That's the apathy.
That is true, but I mean, I hope that more and more people will join this discussion, and I think we can stack up what we're talking about. And when you ask about the cost of delivering these banks, I'll put it to you this way: that the net cost to the average person in this country is 4.5 million people into about 220 billion euro. You can figure out what that is. It's 50,000 or thereabouts per man, woman and child. That's the cost. The cost of setting up these 10 community banks is this. It's 60 cents per month for 5 years for every man, woman and child. Job done and dusted.
Would people have shares in the community? No, you wouldn't do share thing.
Everybody will own the bank, but nobody will have the right to sell them or buy them or they'll have no shareholding in them, good, bad or indifferent. They will be there as an institution for the community.
Okay. Well, Gerry, quickly, go ahead.
Just come in there on the credit unions. Yeah. There's a huge opportunity here for the credit unions to set up banks, public bank. Maybe a co-op bank is what they could set up. But they have the network, they have the funding, they have the members. They could do this in the morning with the right assistance and advice.
Yeah.
And take that 7 billion in funds out of the private banks and leverage it for their own benefit and for their members' benefit and for the community benefit.
I think it would be a good idea. Lads, we're going to have to leave it there because we have a few things to go through before we finish up. Thanks a lot for coming on to the show. Do you have any quick questions, quick fire questions for the lads?
I just have a quick question from Chris. Chris is wondering, where will the new banks get the currency from? Duncan was wondering, but first you have to get a licence to be able to operate as a bank. And he spoke about the programme called Bank of Dave. He tried to open his own bank, but legislation stopped him in the beginning. But we've also heard as well, and I'm sure the whole country has heard it by now, that several Irish banks are in fact operating without a licence anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're operating insolvent anyway because they don't have the money. So that
if the public bank get a licence, we'll be the only bank in Ireland with a proper licence.
Well, that would be a good thing, and probably if you get the money as well, you'd be in the bank to have your own money and not be trading insolvent.
Where do we get the money? You take in deposits and you leverage the deposits at 6-1. Very conservative.
I think it'd be good. It'd be good to say. I wish you all the best. Both of us wish you all the best and good luck with doing that. And I think what we'll do is we'll do a part 2 down the line, and we'll get you on in a couple of months' time and have a full interview and talk about it in depth, I should say. And that's my teeth again. I had to push my teeth in.
RepublicIrelandBank.com is our website, and we're looking for serious people to join the debate, drive the debate, because this is a big discussion, and while we've gone through a lot of stuff here, we could talk about this now until this time tomorrow. There's a mountain of stuff involved in this, and there's a lot of education, a lot of learning involved, and Gerry in particular has done phenomenal research, but also Joe Lynn and Joan Maguire and several others of us have been involved in researching this issue, learning about this issue and developing the idea. So I think welcome on board to anyone that's interested.
Brilliant. Well, that's excellent. Thanks for giving out the link there, James and Gerry. Thanks for coming on. Just stay with us there for a few minutes. We're just going to go up to a musical break and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
That was a very, very short version of Money for Nothing, Dire Straits. We're just talking to the lads there. They've actually agreed to come back on and do a part 2. I know a lot of people kind of find it difficult to get their head around this information, and I don't claim to be an expert either. I find a lot of this kind of stuff, talking about the whole banking issue, I find it a little bit daunting as well. But the lads have agreed to come back on. But they have given us the link to the website there. I've put it in the chat rooms, RepublicIrelandBank.com. There's a load of information. It's jam-packed with information. So hopefully if you do have any questions, they will be answered on the website.
Yeah, we'll have to do a part 2. We'll try and do a full interview next time. There's so much to talk about regarding the financial system. And although we did kind of mention MPE, I'd just like to see the figures and how it works, especially with fractionalising depositors' accounts and money, and the usury interest being charged, admin fee being charged for that. Just out of interest, I'd just like to see the figures and how it work out, plus the interest rates you'd have to pay for loans if you're getting loans out as an SME or just an individual. But just catching up before we finish up, how's your week, Steve?
Yeah, my week's been fine. Not too much to report. So I've been kind of enjoying the good weather of late. I think it has everybody, in a good mood. So it's long may it last. Although it probably being in Ireland, it probably won't last too long. But we're just out there the other day in work, and I was shooting the breeze with one of my colleagues, and it just goes to show all the little seed planting that I do. It's obviously having a little bit of an effect there, because one of my co-workers was watching the sky. We were commenting on what a beautiful day it happened to be, and one of the co-workers looked up, seen some chemtrails in the sky, and a couple of contrails. I think it was a contrail and two or three chemtrails. And I was asked, Are they the chemtrails? And I nearly hit the deck. I was going, gee, what? Yeah, those are the chemtrails. And what about that one? No, that's only a contrail. And we kind of just got discussing that, and I thought, wow, I'm making a breakthrough. But something else. Alan and I were on the UWS Radio Marathon there on Saturday, yesterday, depending on when you're listening to the podcast. We done a segment there, 30-minute segment, and we spoke about a lot of different things. But one thing that kind of did come up before we actually started doing the recording or the segment, and we were talking about a dome, and we were talking about the whole Men in Black, and we discussed that, Men in Black and a dome, and Alan even spoke about The Simpsons. And I remember seeing that episode of The Simpsons about they were living in a dome. I think there was a dome over the place where the family live, and the whole community actually. And we were just kind of discussing what if we were we think the Earth is big, and we think we're kind of we're big, if you like. And what if we are small, so small that we don't even realise how small, and we're actually living in a dome, and we're being like a petri dish, we're being watched and observed by outside influences. And it was kind of mad, because it just kind of got me thinking, when you hear people talking about the round Earth and the flat Earth, and not that I'm subscribing to either side, I'm still on the fence with splinters. But no, it was kind of interesting, to just think that maybe we are a social experiment. Maybe we're just, tiny little pieces of insignificant nothingness, just floating around on this Earth, be it round or be it flat, and being observed, because it's just interesting. There, that's just kind of what went through my mind there yesterday when we were doing that thing. But not too much on the radar. As I say, even plans for next week, I'm just going to be enjoying the sunshine and getting out, doing a little bit of gardening when we can, because it's kind of, the grass grows, and I think everyone's definitely in a good mood anyway. So I hope it lasts. There you go. That's it in a nutshell. How was your week?
I'd say my week, the two movies I seen during the week, because I felt I had to watch them, was The Truman Show, which is exactly what you're talking about being in a dome, and The Jupiter Ascending, which is more got to do with more sinister things and E.T. and all that kind of stuff. And watch them two movies, are quite interesting. I'd recommend having a watch of both of them and making up your own mind. During the week, just something that I was talking to Anthony Hughes about after the show last week. One of the things I was told, one of the nurses in a local surgery, was that bleached tea bags, the chemicals used to bleach tea bags, are carcinogenic. And when you actually push the spoon, the way you put your tea bag in your tea, and then you squeeze the tea bag on the side to get more tea out of it. Well, them bubbles that you see in bleached tea bags are actually the chemicals from the bleach, and they're carcinogenic. And I just spoke to Anthony about that, because I was told by a nurse about it, and then I went up and did a bit of research on it. So that was quite interesting. The other thing I seen during the week was videos. Great work by the people protesting, and they were following TDs around like Richard Bruton in Coolock, telling them the truth and giving them, a bit of a hard time, and fair play to them, calling them parasite and getting them to wake up. It's a bit of a wake-up call for them. Great work done. And I think they're just kind of getting rattled, because people are now standing up to them and having a go at them. I've never ever seen that before in Ireland, where people went and followed the TDs and really gave them some hell. And look, fair play to them. They are destroying the country, so they deserve it. That they're on the platform to be to have a go at, because they're saying they're representing us, supposed to be, and they're not representing us. So that's just the way it works. That's just the way it works. It comes with the territory. Now, next week, as you all know, we have the Pain Genie seminar. We've mentioned it earlier in the show. I'm just going to mention it again for the latecomers, that it's in the Ardboyne Hotel in Navan, and it's on Sunday starting at 1 p.m. If you come from Dublin, you can get the 109 bus from Bazaris, stops just outside the Ardboyne in Navan. Now, we'll also, for your pleasure, we'll also be selling T-shirts at a reduced rate of €10. Also, we have a few copies of the book left, How the Banks Are Screwing You and What You Can Do About It. And that will also be a tenner as well. Please, if you have to change, it'd be great, because we probably won't have change. And we'll have stickers. There'll be a sticker for everybody in the audience for free. We're doing a bit of Oprah. Or is it a Ryan Tuberty? I'm not too sure. I get confused these days.
I think it's Late Show. Probably your man Ryan Tuberty, yeah.
Yeah. So that's really what we're going to be doing. So we'll have them available. It's all voluntary, not mandatory. And again, we are doing the Pain Genie seminar just so you can have a look at it and make up your own mind. We're not selling it. We're not promoting it. We're not, we just want you to see it and for you to make up your own mind. That's why we're doing it. Just in case people go down the road and say, oh, you're promoting and selling it. No, we're not. It's not on the website. We're not selling it or anything like that. We just want you to see it and for you to make up your own mind. And if it does work for you and, if people are saying, God, that's brilliant, my pain's gone, well, then fantastic. I mean, you've used it again, Steve. You have yours in. You've used it. Yeah. And how did you get on?
I get on fine. As I say, look, Richard gave us a demonstration and it worked for me. I was converted straight away. Definitely. And so, I mean, I got one in, and I have to admit, came in on Thursday, played around, as I said at the top of the show, Thursday and a bit Friday. Maybe just topping up where Richard had gone over. It's an ongoing injury that I've had. It's been at me for years, and I have to say, even tonight now, I'm pain free. So
brilliant. Well, look,
I'm looking forward to the seminar.
When does it debate against something? Does it work? Does it not work? Then you have to look at the proof. And if the proof says that it's working and Steve said that he's in pain and he's not in pain, well then, if that's not proof, I don't know what is. And we are open-minded skeptics. That's why we got Richard to come and show us, to prove it to us in the first place, before we kind of broadcast it on the show and tell people. And again, it's just come along and make up your own mind. So anyway, until we see you next week, as myself, Alan James, if you're coming to Ardboyne next Sunday, as I say, try and get there on time if you can, please. And make yourself known. Come up and say hello. We're not going to bite. And
not hard anyway.
Not hard anyway. We might do a little kind of survey before we start to see how many people are there for OYM and get you to put your hand up, because we don't know how many people actually heard of OYM, and if not, find out. We're doing a little bit of marketing before we get Richard on. But so we'll see you next week. If you're in the Ardboyne, take care, have a good one, and we'll catch you next week. Bye bye.
Okay, and as Chris on the chat said there, OYM tinfoil hats are a $5. Yes, they are indeed, or $2 for a $10.
Oh, can I just say, we have Joanne Kramer. Joanne has been on before, and she's great information about sky anomalies and all that kind of stuff. Sorry, Steve.
Sky Anomalies, that's the Sky TV, is it?
That's it.
Yeah, I don't subscribe. Anyway, okay, we'll do it all again next week. Look forward to seeing any of you in the Ardboyne Hotel. You'll recognise us anyway, and we look nothing like we sound.
Exactly. Yeah, be prepared for a shock.
They'll be saying, who's those two elflas up there? Alan and Steve must have brought their dads. Right, go on, we'll catch you next week. So until then, have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.